Let's get started. So let's talk first about traditional game infrastructure. I mean, this is very generic in general. We're not going to go through every specific use case, but typical traditional game infrastructure in Web 2 looks a little bit like this, right? You have users that have an access point to the game, either that being a computer, a phone, a tablet, or something, and they play the game. In this case, it's like a cats game, interacting via that access point, and that points to probably an endpoint, an API, a server, and you have everything that is owned by a single entity called Cats Inc. And these entities have multiple things like a database, endpoints, and a servers, and basically the users interact with the game through the access point, right? And in this case, you can clearly see there's a disconnection between the user and the game itself, because everything on the game is owned by a Cats Inc. And then the user only has an interface and an access point to interact with the game. If you change that and you introduce blockchain into the equation, this can be now a little bit different, because the user has an access point that can be the computer, the tablet, the phone, but then the user also has the indirect interaction with the blockchain, right? And that adds an extra layer in which the user now can own certain things about the game, or can interact directly with the game through the blockchain layer. That doesn't mean that the game can be fully or has to be fully decentralized, right? Like the game can also have a centralized port, like endpoint servers and database, but it can leverage blockchain smart contracts and IPFS to improve the gaming experience, or even like allow the players to have a sense of ownership of parts of the game. This doesn't mean that it's going to be less complex. Actually, what we've seen right now in the Web3 industry is that it actually adds a layer of complexity, because games have to have an off-chain component, an on-chain component. But the idea here is to explore how can this improve the overall gaming industry in general, right? As I see here, now you have multiple new complexities, because you have the servers, the database like you had before, but then you also have this. You have to develop the smart contracts, interact with the blockchain, and maybe use IPFS to store NFT metadata if you want to use IPFS. And so, why games in Web3, right? And we're going to go first about the narrative and then the reality, right? Because people like to sell games in Web3, first talking about NFTs, right? And they say NFTs are the ultimate weapon for ownership, right? Like it's the ultimate where people can truly own their stuff, and it's not owned by the corporations and the industry, but users actually own the weapon in a weapon-based game, or the card in an NFT kind of trading system. And so they talk about ownership, right? About the ownership that Web3 NFTs provide to users. The next thing about narrative is cross-chain, right? They can create cross-chain experiences. That's another thing we hear a lot about Web3 games. That these experiences can be embedded into the game, and that word really sells, like when you talk about cross-chain. And the last thing is about a marketplace, right? I mean, we've seen this in some NFT games that you can use marketplaces to buy and sell NFTs that really sort of goes back to the first point of NFTs, which allows ownership and transfer of ownership, right? And so we've seen games in which you can get an NFT and then you can sell it in the marketplace, and users actually make money out of it, and so on. Another point that I didn't mention about NFTs, which is important in the Web3 narrative, that it's really, really used, is about cross-chain compatibility, right? The idea that you can own an asset on a game, and then you can use it in another game, right? That's also something that you hear a lot when you talk about Web3 gaming in the industry. But then you got to think about the narrative, the reality of things, right? I mean, when we actually see games that are using Web3, in the NFT section, you can see games that are usually NFTs are a common way to raise funds, basically. Like they have an NFT campaign in which they sell a new set of a campaign that they sell a new version of the NFTs, a new set of cards or something. That's a way for game studios to raise funds, right? And NFTs are normally limited to a single game. Like I've yet been able to see a game that you buy NFTs on one game and you can actually use it in a different game that is from a different game studios, right? And think about what this means. I mean, if I'm in a game studio and I develop an asset for my game, I don't have incentives to actually allow players to use it in a different game because that's the IP that I created as a game studio. And so the reality is that games are not really incentivized to create these kind of assets so that they can be used in another game. The next thing is about cross-chain, right? Like I've heard about many games saying they're cross-chain, and what we've actually seen is that all they do is to deploy their contracts on multiple chains, and that allow basically people and users to access their games from multiple blockchains. But that actually just creates fragmentation, right? That doesn't really create a single game where people from multiple communities can play and enjoy in a true cross-chain experience. I've only seen one game that is actually trying to use something different with cross-chain, which is XLR Racers. They deployed to Moonbeam, and they're using XLR passports to try to create experiences that are cross-chain, in which, for example, let's say you have a racing game, right, in which you have ships, and they race against other ships and so on. And basically, there's like a planet called Moonbeam in which you can race on that planet, but then you can also race on the Binance Smart Chain planet, right? And so what happens is that you can translate those NFTs into Binance, and then people can bet there, and then you can are actually gaming on Binance Smart Chain. So that's different because that's not just deploying contracts everywhere, fragmenting experiences. You're trying to embed everything into a single experience, where you're actually using cross-chain and XLR passports in this case to translate your game to other chains as well. And then last but not least, about marketplaces, teams often use external marketplaces, right? And this is also tampering the in-game user experience, right? If I'm playing a game in which I'm a warrior or whatever, and I want to sell my stuff, I have to go to an external marketplace that is owned by an external company and so on. And that doesn't feel the way that it should be if you compare it to Web2 games. Because Web2 games have set the bar really, really high. Right? The experience is embedded, it's all in-game, it's really fast, really snappy, and that should be our standard if we want to sort of compete with Web2 gaming. And so now let's talk about the title of the presentation, which is gaming governance. And this is sort of like a new narrative that we've tried to pitch to gaming studios because it's kind of different, right? It's try to create a different strategy on why games in Web3 can create better experiences. So let's go through an exercise. Imagine we're playing Counter-Strike. I used to play it back when it was like 1.5 a long time ago, in cyber cafes and everything. And so imagine a user is playing Counter-Strike, right? And in the new versions of Counter-Strike, you have loot boxes in which you can, get new weapons, new skins, new things like that. And so basically, the users are incentivized to get loot boxes to get items, right? And these items have rarity stats, right? Like my skin is super rare. And so now it has more value than other skins. And this is all Web3, right? This both flows that I'm going to explain are both Web3 relatable, right? And so you can see that users are incentivized to get loot boxes. These loot boxes can be NFTs that have other NFTs embedded into it. And this next NFTs, which are the items, have rarity stats and stuff like that. And basically, they can then access a marketplace that can be external or in the game to sort of sell these NFTs and basically get money out of it, right? And so you can see clearly how in this flow, users are linearly incentivized, basically, from left to right, right? They don't have any sort of incentives to actually re-engage with the game because they only want to go from left to right. They want to get loot boxes to get as cheaply as possible, to get the most rare items out there to be able to earn money. The moment that this flow is interrupted, users are not incentivized to play the game anymore, and they're just like, okay, I'm going to exit, I'm going to go to another game, and that's it. So what gaming governance is trying to do is basically now you have SAT users because this creates an experience that's not retroactive, right? The moment that you caught the item on the right, then that's it. You're not incentivized to play the game again, right? So let's say now you have a SAT community of users that you can provide some sort of governance token. Because we've all played games in which there's probably a weapon that is overpowered, right? Like it's super stable when you shoot, or it has too much damage, or people default to when they're trying to play the game. And so SAT users, and there's a governance token associated to the game. And this governance token allows you, and you can actually get this governance token either through experience, right? The more you play the game, the most governance tokens you have, because allegedly you should have more experience with the game, and your power of decision should be sort of rewarded because, yeah, you know the game probably a little bit more. Or you can get the governance token through collaborations by providing PRs or code collaborations to the game. like, I can help develop the game, and because I created some development around the game, you can get incentivized by your governance tokens. Or like a campaign, right? You want to do a campaign that is like, we're launching the 2023 version or 2024, 2025 version of the game, and you create an incentivization campaign to bring users, and you reward them with governance tokens. And then the idea is that the users with this governance token, they can actually vote, right? And vote around what? They can vote around, for example, if there's a weapon that is overpowered or OP, you can actually reduce the stats of that weapon. Because if that weapon is an NFT, the NFT can be described via metadata, and that metadata can say, okay, this weapon has, like, I don't know, 90 damage, you can lower it to 70, right? And the cool thing about this is that then you can vote on items, for example, to modify their stats, and then you have happy users because now they're incentivized, right? They feel part of the community. They feel part of the game, and they feel they can make an impact on the game by changing things about how the game feels and how the game is. And this is because blockchain provides a way to have a lot of these things on chain. It's not like, it's like a forum post where like people can in Web 2, where people can say, oh no, this weapon it's overpowered, and the game studio is not incentivized to do anything about it because they're making money. In this case, right, you have a direct way to control the stats of the weapons without having to rely on the game studio implementing it, right? And this creates a really interesting feedback loop because now users are incentivized to try to get governance tokens through incentivization campaigns, XP, collaboration, or whatever, to have their voice heard by the game studio, right? And the cool thing about this is that by giving some control to players, there's more community involvement, right? Players feel that are part of the game and not just players of the game. Now, the flow that I presented before, that it's a linear flow, is interrupted. And note that the flow in the top is not prohibited in the second flow. You can still have these users that are basically trying to do loot boxing to get money, but then you have a set of different users that are incentivized to keep playing the game, to be part of it and be part of the community. And so basically, this is really important because community importance increases and players are engaged. I think no one is against the idea of that community, how important community is for the game itself. And as long as you create a community that is involved and engaged, that really is going to impact how the game is played and how the game develops. The second thing is that you create a new incentivization mechanism for studios, right? They only are not incentivized to just launch a new NFT campaign for a new set of cards, a new set of players, a new set of skins to try to get money, right? They're also incentivized through these governance tokens that have real utility. They have real utility because now you have a set of community members that can vote on how the game behaves, and now they have a different incentivization mechanism for that. And then, why Moonbeam for all of this, right? And so the idea is that we incentivize game studios to pursue such strategies. We're really hot on this idea, and we're happy to help these teams that want to do the governance on gaming studios. And we also have great game-specific tech and support, right? We have Nemas, which is a gaming launch platform that is heavily involved with Moonbeam. We also have, the typical SDKs for gaming like MetaFab, Unity. We also have Remark and Third Web. And so basically, game studios that come to Moonbeam to deploy their Web3 games have everything they need from a get-go, but they also have a community and members of the team that are incentivizing these strategies, and they also have great tech support for anything specific that they need. And so, the idea of this governance on gaming narrative is that it's sort of like a different strategy on why games should have a Web3 component that goes a little bit away from the typical sort of narratives of just loot boxing and many games that we've seen follow this strategy that a lot of people have heard about Axie Infinity in the past, and like nowadays, like nobody's talking about that anymore, kind of. And so that's a narrative that has to change for really like Web3 games that will sustain in time and in history. And so yeah, thanks a lot for hearing. If you want to check today's slides, you can check it at the QR code. If you want to learn more about Moonbeam, visit moonbeam.network. You have the Discord, Telegram, Twitter, and if you want to reach out to me directly, you can use Telegram. I'm not that active on Twitter. And so yeah, thanks a lot for listening, and happy to answer any questions outside. Thank you.